Hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Marcel Petitpas. Marcel, excited to have you on the show. Before we jumped into the interview, I wanted to read a little bit more about Marcel so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's working on. And Marcel is the CEO and co-founder of Parakeeto, a company dedicated to helping agencies measure and improve their profitability by streamlining their operations and reporting systems. He's also the head strategic coach at SaaS Academy by Dan Martel, the #1 coaching program for B2B SaaS businesses in the world. In his work as a speaker, podcast host, and consultant, specializing in agency profitability optimization, he's helped hundreds of agencies around the world measure the right metrics and improve their operations and profitability without relying on financial data and accounting professionals, and take control of their business with simple numbers anyone can understand and measure. When he's not helping agencies make more money, he's probably watching The Office or Parks and Recreation on a never-ending loop and eating breakfast foods for every meal of the day. And I always appreciate having other podcasters on the show. So he has an awesome podcast called the Agency Profit Podcast, where he has loads of information, knowledge for all agency owners to level up. But one of the things that really stuck out to me more than anything else is that he said that they simply try to help improve agency profitability. And I think simplicity is one of the things that we always kind of gloss over. And he simply said he wants to help agencies to win. So super excited to have you on the show, Marcel. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am ready as ever.
Awesome. Well, let's get it started then. So let's kick it off by rewinding the clock a little bit. Hear a little bit more on how you got started. What I call your CEO story.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of people, my first business was a service-based business. I started a small agency and we were doing real estate virtual reality. So before you could do this with your iPhone, we would go into a house, take 1 million pictures, stitch them into 3D models and create, a 3D rendering of the house that you could tour on like a VR headset. And those margins were so tough. It was at a time, this was back, call it 2016, when it was a buyer's market. Houses were sitting on the market for a long time, and so real estate agents were not willing to invest a lot of money into their listings, and we had such tight margins. And I remember spending so much time struggling with these problems that we help agencies with today of how much money do I make on a client or a project, and how much can I afford to pay people to do this work, and how do I generate enough cash flow to scale this business? And the long and short of that business is I realized at some point, trying to run through all these numbers, that it couldn't be more than a hobby for me because of the margins that I was able to generate in that business. So I then became interested in software and building SaaS companies. And a few years later, a friend of mine, Jared, who runs a big software development agency out of Boise, he reached out and said, "Hey man, I've got a team of people that spend 2 days a week building spreadsheets to answer all these questions that are simple but not easy. Like, do we make money on our clients and projects, and who's utilized and who's not? There has to be a better way to do this." And that was really the impetus for us to say, yeah, like I resonated with that problem. He resonated with it. We went and talked to all of our friends at rating agencies. And once you pierce through their armor, they were all also struggling with this. And so we said, there's something here. There's got to be a way to do this better. And that started a 6-year today journey to try and find a way to make this easier for people that are running these kinds of businesses.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. And of course, realizing like so many different agencies and different businesses that have that issue. But I feel like, really great businesses get started like in garages and really awesome place. But I feel like that phrase that you said, there has to be a better way. I feel like that's the start of really great and phenomenal things that happen as well, too. So it sounds like that question, that statement, and then propelling you to all the awesome things you've been able to do now.
And I think what's important about that statement, and it's something that I've had to relearn the hard way many times in my career, is that it's rooted in a problem, right? It has to be a better way. Like inherently there's an idea there, and we had ideas, but the reason we're still around today at Parakeeto is because the problem that we were trying to solve was real. The ideas we had about how to solve it were wrong a lot for years, but the problem was real, and that's what kept us alive.
Yeah, that's so huge. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I think at the heart of entrepreneurship, it's about problem solving. We can sometimes fall in love with our ideas, fall in love with our widgets or whatever we're building, that we forget about why we created, which is to solve that problem. And I always say, like the how might evolve, but the why shouldn't. And if we know we're trying to solve this problem, like you said, you might go through the pivots and changes and those things don't work and they don't fit the way we want them to do, but you still are so mission driven that it continues to kind of propel you forward.
Yeah, 100%. That was certainly true for us. We had lots of iterations and changes and pivots along the way, but we finally closed in on something that I think is really transformational for our clients.
Nice. Absolutely love that. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more about the amazing things you all have been able to create. Could you take us through exactly how you're serving with and making an impact with the clients you work with?
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, our whole prerogative is to help agencies and really more broadly professional services businesses measure and improve their profitability. And we do that through a combination of software that we've built, but also consulting services. And that's important because we sold software for about 3 years. And every time we sold somebody software, they either didn't have clean enough or well-structured enough data to put it in. They struggled to get their data into the right format. They didn't really know what they were looking at or how to take action on it or get an understanding of the data that was being shown to them. And so over time, we kind of got pulled into helping them with all those things and realized, okay, the real solution to this problem needs to include both like a hands-on consulting approach and the tools to facilitate the process. And so with that, we kind of have a 3-step process that we take clients through to solve this problem. And we take it one step at a time. Some clients only need to do the first step. Some clients want to do all 3. The first step is really to design a model for their business. And to me, this is one of the most important things we've done in 6 years is we've built a framework that connects the dots between people, projects, and time, or operations as we call it, the financial model of the business, and the sales model of the business. And this is incredibly elusive because anybody that's running an agency or a service-based business knows that if you've ever sat down and said, I want to do $5 million in revenue next year, and then tried to figure out, well, who do I need to hire? How many hours do they need to work? And how much can I afford to pay them? And what kind of profitability do we need to have on projects? And how do we price things correctly? And how much can we afford to spend on sales and marketing and overhead and on the delivery team? And connecting the dots between all those things is really tough. Our model, which is the first thing that we build for clients, allows you to instantly see that and simulate any change that you want to make to the business. You want to change your price, you want to change your team, you want to set a higher sales target, you want to adjust your budgets. You can see how all of that stuff connects to everything else and never have a question mark about, is this decision that I'm making about my business model moving me further or closer from my goals? So that's really the first thing that we do with clients. The second piece is then installing forecasting, which is really about helping them understand, hey, are the decisions that I'm making moving me further or closer away from our goals? So every time new work comes in, every time they hire somebody, every time they win or lose a client, they can see what that's setting themselves up for in terms of profitability, utilization, cash flow, and how it compares to their model. And then the last piece is what we call feedback loops. That's the third F. And that's really about measuring what's actually happening so that we can spot where our assumptions about how long things will take, about how busy people will be, are out of line with reality. So as an operations team, we can focus on those outliers and capitalize on the biggest opportunities for profitability. And that really closes the loop and gives an agency or professional services firm the muscle of being able to continually tune and maintain their profitability over time. And that's really what we do.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I appreciate you sharing that. I love that you use that analogy, that metaphor, muscle, because I think so many times when you're going into business, you just think it's kind of like you step to the plate, you hit a home run and grand slam or whatever it might be, and then it's over. But really, you have to continue to kind of develop that muscle. But I think one of the struggles I imagine that you're hearing from clients and the reason that you develop this is that so many times we don't have, I guess, the holistic awareness on like how we're developing the muscle. Are we eating enough nutrition? Are we working out? And just all those different factors that could be. And I was listening to one of your interviews, you said lever. That word really stuck with me. Those levers that actually do get you to where you want to be and be aware of all the other things that happen as a result of that.
Yeah. And that's such an important insight that you raised, Gresh, because we really believe that profitability is a process, not an event. And so many of the ways in which people have tried to address this in the past are monolithic and they're treated like an event and they're static in nature. And that to me is what makes them not that useful. Like to sit down and set a budget for the year, to have it 2 weeks later be completely irrelevant because we lost a person, we hired another person, we lost a big client, we gained another client, we added a new service, we changed our pricing. Now that model is completely out of date. So how is that really helping us? And we really believe in this process of saying, let's give ourselves the tools and the framework to be able to constantly maintain our understanding of this because things are going to change. Sometimes because the market's changing, but other times because we as a business need to change in order to keep up and adapt and stay relevant. And so that's really why we've designed this to try to enable a permanent shift in somebody's ability to maintain their understanding of profitability.
Nice. I love that word enablement. And I think it's so funny that you were saying that because I almost feel like because all those considerations, it can almost paralyze you from deciding to make decisions because you're not sure how it's going to affect all those things. So I imagine this also really kind of provides a catalyst for those that want to change, and probably we all frankly probably need to change and make adjustments gradually throughout our business. So I imagine that it creates, for lack of a better term, like culture around the business itself as well too.
It does. And one of the most powerful ways in which it does that is it helps get everybody on the same side of the table. Because when we have math that just tells us, hey, this is the impact of this decision, this is the impact of this change in our business model, we don't have to spend any time discussing or arguing or disagreeing about what we think is going on or what we think is going to happen. We can all just sit on the same side of the table and say, okay, now that we have clarity on what is objective, let's work together to figure out how to get to that place or how to solve that challenge. And so it is a powerful tool as well in just getting buy-in and getting alignment across the organization, which becomes more and more important the bigger the team gets.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to minimize your risk. You're trying to increase your likelihood of being successful, and you can't always guarantee your success by looking at, leaning on this data, being able to understand it and see. I'm going to say the phrase to the minute or to the second or to whatever it is. You get to see how those decisions or indecisions can sometimes affect the things that you're ultimately trying to do.
Yeah, and you raise a really important point, which is like the data is only half the picture. And we have this saying at Parakeeto where the data can only tell you what the data is, but it can't tell you why the data is. And that's where that intersection of having the right information that helps you focus and facilitate good discussions, but then also being able to bring your team around that, build understanding, and then collaborate to get to the right outcomes is critically important.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost wonder, is that part of what I would like to call your secret sauce? This could be for yourself individually, the business, or a combination of both. But is it that ability to, I guess, be able to see the forest for the trees, but do it in a way to empower those that are, using Parakeeto, that are able to understand that one, they can make changes, but they get to be on that same side. You almost feel like you're empowering the team so that they can make they can spend more time in their zone of genius, but also be able to make those very calculated and high likelihood of succeeding decisions within their organizations.
It's exactly right. And it's a big part of the reason why so many of the engagements that we do with clients that are long-term involves a coaching component with our consulting team. So you can bring that team of whether it be leaders or executives or even individual contributors in your team to that touch point with the consultant. And it's an applied learning experience where we're coming to that meeting, we're saying, hey, here's what we're seeing in your data. Here are some things that we think we want to discuss. Why do you think this might be going on? And in that exercise, the team learns how to interpret the data, what it means, how to think through the problems that it's surfacing. And we start to create buy-in and facilitate that muscle that, we'll come back to that word, the muscle of being able to take this information and turn it into action that actually gets the organization moving in the right direction. And I really believe that that is one of the most critical things that we do is we close that loop, and that, we're teaching people how to fish essentially, where over time, what we start to see is those leaders and managers that come to those meetings, they start using the reports outside of the meetings. They start taking that data and discussing it with their teams. And when that starts to happen, we know that we've done our job.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets to be a really powerful place to be because, again, it starts to become the DNA within those organizations, and it becomes just so powerful to be able to do that. And I think so many times we see these commercials sometimes of what things can do, and it looks really cool. So you think you get the same SaaS system, you get whatever the exercise equipment, whatever it might be in front of you, and you're like, it doesn't exactly do the things that I do. I need help. So I love that you marry both of those things so that not only do you have the really impactful software, but you also have that support that helps people to make sure that they can reach the goals that they ultimately want to reach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really what it's all about. Like I said, is making sure that people have that muscle and are enabled to make this part of their process as an organization.
Absolutely. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
sleep, diet, exercise is 90% of it. And I think as somebody that is probably also, trying to take care of themselves, like you can't out supplement, out podcast, out binaural beats, out meditate bad sleep, diet, and exercise. So there is nothing that trumps that. But if we're talking about optimization beyond that. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just getting around other entrepreneurs and making that a practice that is regular. Of course, I go to therapy, I journal, all those other things, but like there's nothing that can replace every month or even once a quarter, just like getting in a room with other entrepreneurs that understand what you're going through and giving yourself that space to share the real things that you're dealing with, the challenges, get external perspectives, and just be able to connect in that way. Of all the things that have helped me become a better leader, that's been it, especially if in that room, I've got some people that are a few steps ahead of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. And I love both of those, those hacks, because I think so many times when we're thinking about how to optimize a business, how to reach whatever bottom line, all those things, we can sometimes skip over one of the most important cogs or pieces or foundation, which is ourselves. And the sleep, diet, exercise, we can sometimes want to drive and go to more, 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 but we're not paying attention to those things, and they affect us from a business standpoint, but also personally, professionally, and so many other ways. But I also love the practicality of, I often say, your altitude will be determined by your environment. So the people that you're around, if they're a few steps further, that's going to determine your success. And some of the things that we don't think are reality become reality because you start to spend time around the people that are a little bit farther, that are pushing for more. You start to realize, hey, I can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it has become so much more important for me as I've realized, that old saying, like, what got you here won't get you there. For me, and I think for a lot of people, when you first start your business, usually one of your greatest skills is your ability to just like suffer and sacrifice your own well-being in order to put in the hours that are necessary to get this thing off the ground. But once you have a team and that team relies on you for leadership, and you have to like show up to those interactions from a good state of mind, burning yourself and stretching yourself so thin is not conducive to that. And that's a lesson that I had to learn and am currently learning, where like I have a tendency to just be able to work and grind. And if I do that too much now, I risk showing up burnt out to a conversation with my team and just not actually benefiting them. And so the company actually needs me to show up differently and take care of myself, because it's about quality of input for me now as opposed to quantity.
Yeah, I love that you share that, and I think so many times we don't realize the being present, but also the thinking, just all those things that require that level headedness, so that you are able to make decisions, you are able to see what's happening, and so many of those things that are required to get to that next level, and level after that, and level after that.
100%. Yeah.
So, what would you consider to be your answer to one of my favorite questions, which is the CEO nugget? This is a little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell your favorite client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
That's a good one. What golden nugget do I have for entrepreneurs and business owners? I think I'll just share what I think the biggest revelation was for me. And it's ironic because it's what actually enabled me to become really successful for the first time, which is shifting my mindset from trying to prove myself right, which is what I did for the first 6 years of being an entrepreneur. I have this idea, I have this, path that I want to pursue, and all of my execution is framed around like, how do I sell this? How do I prove myself right and become successful? Instead of what actually got me to where I needed to go, which was, how do I prove myself wrong as quickly as possible? How do I figure out what's not going to work about this as quickly as humanly possible, so that I can then unlock what's actually going to work? And it seems subtle, and it is subtle, but it was everything for me. And the realization underneath all of this is that me trying to prove myself right was coming from a place of insecurity, which is largely like a lot of the reasons that I became an entrepreneur in the first place. I wanted to prove to people that I was confident, that I would, could be successful. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of things that I was chasing with that. And it influenced me trying to prove myself right in everything, which was really an avoidance of being wrong. But that's the ironic thing, is as soon as I stopped thinking in that way and I started looking for, how do I figure out what I'm wrong about as quickly as possible, the things that were holding me back, I was actually able to see, understand, address, and overcome much more quickly. So that's got to be the biggest thing. And it's purely anecdotal, but hopefully it resonates with some of the people that are listening.
Yeah, it definitely resonates with me, and I know definitely a lot of the people listen, because a lot of times we are kind of driven or pulled, maybe even like a magnet, towards that mission of like saying, I am right, I am able to do this, trying to have that proving But I almost feel like that restricts a lot of the creativity, the opportunity. Like you said, a lot of things, being able to see the forest for the trees and see what those opportunities are. The word that kind of popped in my mind, I don't know if that kind of resonates with you as well too, is that ego piece. It sounds like a subtle shift, but it sounds like a huge shift because it stops being as much about the ego, about me wanting to prove so I have to be right versus me saying, I might be wrong and I'm possibly wrong, but let me figure out how to create opportunities so that at the end of the day we can get to where we want to be.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Nice. And I wanted to ask you now one of my absolute favorite questions. What's the definition of what it means to be a CEO? And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So Marcel, what does being a CEO mean to you?
You know, the longer I've been in this seat, a mentor of mine, Dan, has said something to me on a number of occasions that has continued to be truer than I thought it was the first time I heard it, which is if your business is stuck, look in the mirror. That's probably where the bottleneck is. And the longer I've been in this seat, the bigger the team has grown, the more I've realized that essentially what being a CEO is trying to develop yourself to become the version of a leader that your business needs. And essentially, your personal development has to be at the pace that you want your business to grow. And so if you really reduce it, it's like being a CEO is the ultimate exercise in personal development. You have to have a big enough vision and be a good enough leader that the goals and aspirations of your entire team can fit underneath that. And if they can't, then those people are going to have to find somewhere else to work. And that's really what it comes down to is it's like you're full-time at personal development, and that should give you the capacity to develop a team underneath you that's capable of achieving the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's a huge thought, and I love that perspective because again, you get so caught in up in like I'm the CEO, I'm this, I'm that, and the third, and again, that ego plays such a big part, but not realizing that we have to develop ourselves in order to get further. I almost wonder, do you have a lot of those conversations with clients as well too? Because I think that as much as we want to be able to kind of level up, sometimes it's also leaning in on those hacks, those things that maybe we didn't realize could help us go farther and can advance more of what we know. Do you find like that ends up being a conversation you have with clients as well?
It is. And I think where the impetus for that comes from is, for example, when we do the first step in our process, we model their business and then we usually audit their current performance against that model. And we're able to show them, hey, these are the reasons that you haven't been as profitable as you want to be. And this is what you need to do to become more profitable. So that's really clear. And it's really simple often. However, it's rarely easy. So for example, if the insight is, hey, you've got 3 full-time employees more than you need for the amount of revenue that you're bringing in, it's simple. We need to get rid of 3 people. But that is not easy. It's one of the hardest things we have to do as leaders. Or if we say, hey, right now you are theoretically pricing things at a $150 rate, but when we look at how much time actually goes in, you're earning closer to $80 an hour. Well, that's simple, but reconciling that is not easy. And there's a lot of different ways in which you have to approach that. And so often that's where people get stuck is they have this kind of bittersweet moment at the end of that engagement where they go, I feel like this is so clear and I love that. Like I know exactly what I need to do, but then they take a step back and I check in with them about a week later and they go, yeah, now the challenge is this shit is really hard. And a lot of times it's very emotional. And so that is often where the conversation comes from. And what we find is that a lot of times they intuitively knew what the problem was. And now they can't avoid it anymore because it's just math. And they're like, yeah, the math says this is the problem. And now I actually need to do something about it.
Yeah, I appreciate you expounding upon that. And I say so many times we can forget about the human part of business, but the CEOs, leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, whatever the titles might be, those are really those difficult conversations, those difficult decisions that sometimes you have to make for the sake of the mission and for the sake of the vision. It doesn't mean you can't like shift or change or pivot or all those things, but it means that sometimes we have to face the things that we're looking at that we may sometimes know, but when we have that data, that information, then it makes it as plain as day.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Marcel, truly appreciate that definition. Of course, appreciate your time even more. So what I wanted to do is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people can get hold of you, listen to your podcast, find out about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you having me on this platform and everyone tuning in. If you run a service-based business and you want to learn how to make it more profitable, we have a free resource called the Agency Profit Toolkit, and it's got training videos, templates, and all kinds of free resources that'll help you start measuring the most important things that you need to measure in your business. So feel free to go check that out if that's relevant to you. And I think the thing that I'll leave everybody with is really thinking about being problem backwards in everything that you do. That has been the thing that I have had to keep coming back to as we think about building product, as we think about building teams, as we think about like leading people. Is it's really easy to get caught up in all the tactics. It's easy to get caught up in the solutions. But at the end of the day, this game of business is all about solving problems, and you will be rewarded by the scale of the problems that you solve. And those problems are really hard sometimes, and they can be challenging. It can stretch people, but the better we get as individuals and as teams at solving problems, the more successful we'll be. And that's certainly been the case for us.
Nice. Absolutely love that. And people want to get a hold of you. What's the best way for them to do that, Marcel?
Connect with me on LinkedIn or hit us up at Parakeeto.com. And of course, tune into the podcast, Agency Profit Podcast. But LinkedIn's probably the best place to connect. Reach out, send a message. I'm always happy to chat and add value if you have some questions or challenges you want to work through.
Absolutely. And that agency toolkit will also be on the site as well too, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And I can give you a link if you want to include it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. To make it even easier, like Marcel mentioned, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes as well, too, so that you can check that out and find out about all the awesome things that he's doing. The podcast, which I promise you, there's loads of great information, especially around profitability. Sometimes we think that there's one way to skin a cat. He shows so many different ways. So appreciate you so much and all the awesome things you're doing. Love that last point, because again, we forget about why we're doing the things that we're doing, which is to try to help to create that solution. If we're not looking at the problems and we're not paying attention to the problems, kind of keeping a temperature gauge on those problems, then we can lose sight of that and not be able to serve the clients to the degree that we want. So thank you so much for doing that, my friend. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.